Gone, some great results. If you're out doing some Christmas shopping over the next few weeks and you are a sports fan, especially a boxing fan, reach for Undisputed. We'll have a look at Paul's latest offering to the literary world right now. Here it is. Look, this is what to look for. And Paul, I'm interested to know that in penning this book about the last decade, you went back 100 years, firstly, to Jack Johnson and Tommy Burns. Why go back that far when you're talking about the last decade predominantly? Well,
before you can classify the current era of Australian boxing, the decade just finished, as a golden one, you've got to measure it. And we look back through the history of boxing. So that was the first big fight that put Australia on the map internationally. And it was the first coloured man, Jack Johnson, to actually win the heavyweight title. He couldn't get a shot at the title in America. And I think it actually showed Australia that we were prepared to give people from all races around the world an opportunity on an even level. So that was the first big fight, and it set off a real spark of the love of boxing in Australia. The shows, the increase of shows around the country showed you the statistics. But boxing is so easy to put the boot into. Everyone wants to give boxing a hard time. It's not politically friendly. People want to ban the sport. But I wanted to recognise what a great era we did. When I sort of sat down and thought about it, we had 2 undisputed world champions, a number of world title holders, and 2 of the biggest fights in the history of boxing in the one decade. To me, that makes it special.
But you've mentioned in the book Kostya Tszyu, Anthony Mundine, Victor Darchinyan, Danny Green, Michael Katsidis, Daniel Gill, world champions in their own right. Who has done the most for Australian boxing out of all those men?
Well, as much as the Danny Green, Anthony Mundine rivalry was something special, and we won't replicate that anytime soon, I often say, when are you going to have 30,000 people at the Sydney Football Stadium to watch a fight again? May never happen again. That was special, locally. But on an international level, we had guys like Kostya Tszyu and Victor Darchinyan, who became undisputed world champions, unified the 3 main titles, and they were flying the flag. As much as they were flying the flag for their own countries, we see Kostya Tszyu here and Zab Judah in 2001 when Kostya became the undisputed super lightweight world champion. As much as he was flying the flag for Russia, he was an Aussie. He debuted here in Australia. He calls himself an Aussie. And that memorable punch, which will never be forgotten, that's a sort of knockout win that will be replayed in 100 years' time.
Yeah, that punch, it must be up there with the greatest punches of the last decade. Can you break it down to the extent of you rating actual punches? Because that's got to be #1, doesn't it?
It's got to be one of the more memorable knockouts. And I think Judah's reaction, the way he went down and got up again, they talk about doing the chicken dance. But it was the significance. It was for the undisputed championship. It hadn't been unified since the 1960s. So that was something special for Kostya. And then Victor Darchinyan did the same thing. He beat the great Mexican Christian Majares at super flyweight when a lot of people didn't give him a chance. Majares was in the top 10 pound for pound at the time. So those 2 guys were flying the Australian flag, and the same with Kostya. Vic was flying the Armenian flag, but he still calls himself an Australian. He's an Australian citizen. Those things were special for Australian boxing, but that rivalry between Danny Green and Anthony Mundine, even if you didn't like boxing, the next morning you wanted to know who won. And I classify in the book, it's like the Holden Ford rivalry. You're either a Mundine man or a Green fan. It was something truly special, and in some ways it's disappointing we haven't seen a rematch.
Well, Paul, you mentioned earlier that often boxing is one of those sports that does take a bit of a pounding. A reminder, the biggest fight of the year, Danny Green BJ Flores, is taking place on Wednesday, 17th of November at Challenge Stadium in Perth. We can see the graphic there now. The Danny Green and Paul Briggs fight was what many considered a bit of a sham. This guy can fight, can't he?
BJ Flores is an undefeated cruiserweight, a very good, strong guy. He's so much bigger. When you see the 2 of them together, he towers over Green. Because Danny's not really a cruiserweight. People forget that. He only went to cruiserweight because he wanted to get the fight with Roy Jones Jr. He's really a light heavyweight. But you can see there, BJ Flores is much bigger and stronger, and he's younger. This is a dangerous fight for Danny. It is probably the most dangerous fight since Danny Green came back. Now, there was a lot of criticism for the Paul Briggs match, and I understand why people are upset, and we have to take responsibility for that as an industry. But there was a punch there, and Paul was hurt. And look, we're just lucky that Paul wasn't seriously hurt.
Yeah, there he is, taking the punch from Danny Green. Was it a punch? Well, that is for others to debate. What about the next 10 years? You've spoken in your book about the last 10, with Danny at 37. He's already retired once. With Anthony Mundine in his mid-30s. Those 2, you would imagine, would say goodbye within the next how long and what after them?
Look, history's shown us that not many fighters do great things after the age of 35. What Danny Green's done to come back and become world champion and beat Roy Jones is special. He is 37, though. He's got a tough fight ahead of him. Anthony Mundine is 35. Victor Chinning is 34. We're looking for the young guys, and that's why this judgment card last week was so important. We need the Daniel Gills and the Lenny Zabavignas and the Billy Dibbs and the Junior Talapaus. And what was also important was we had the Foxtel series, The Contender, which exposed a couple of new guys. We've seen Garth Wood getting a chance against Anthony Mundine. Maybe Garth Wood upsets Anthony Mundine. He's got the opportunity. I'm not saying he's going to do it. But guys like him and Junior Talapau came out of that series because when our main three guys have gone away, you know, who's going to carry us up? We've got Michael Katsidis on November 27 fighting the great Mexican Juan Manuel Marquez. Now, if Katsidis wins that fight, he's going to be the sort of guy who's going to carry us over the next couple of years. But we need these guys to step up now. One
of the great stories in your books details an invite from Jeff Fenech to go with him as a guest of he and his family to the Hall of Fame inductions 2004. Tell us about what that was like. You were like a kid in a lolly shop, weren't you?
I was, you know, as a boxing fan and a historian, as a kid, you know, you look up to great fighters. I always wanted to meet Marvellous Marvin Hagler, the great middleweight, and my plan was to go to the Hall of Fame inductions with Jeff and meet the great man. Within the first 30 minutes, we were sitting on the back of the VIP bus. There was Marvellous Marvin Hagler, Jeff Fenech and his wife Susie, Antonio Tarver, Corey Spinks, Winky Wright, and here I am sitting, this kid from the Sutherland Shire, sitting with these boxing greats in America and thinking, how special is this? So, things like that, you know, Jeff Fenech and Costa Tszyu opened doors for me that nobody else could on the world scene, and I've got tremendous memories and been able to do tremendous, you know, just lift the sport up. This is what I wanted to do. Was we get so much criticism in boxing, let's recognise what we did good and let's recognise the special performances, and this is what this book does over the last 10 years. But we also go back and we compare the eras to say what were the special eras in the late 60s and 70s when we had someone like Lionel Rose and Johnny Famechon, two greats of Australian boxing together.
Undisputed, a golden era in Australian boxing in all good bookshops. That's the official line, isn't it? Thank you for penning a book about the last 10 years. We hope you do it again in another 10 years, not beforehand. Thanks for joining us on The Long Lunch today.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks,
you. Mate.